Hey, Sean, just wanted to ask about Cooper again. Is the plan still to have him practice against the Broncos this week? What does the stats look like right now?
Yep, he'll be back. He and DK will be back out there and able to go this week, so that's good.
And then just to also follow up on Logan Bruss, because I know you didn't have full clarity yesterday. Any additional details on his status as well?
Just got a lateral ankle sprain, and we'll take it a day at a time with him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maria?
Sean, kind of a quick question for you. We've heard so many positive comments from coaches about the joint practices. Do you find that you get more from them in the preseason than you do in preseason games, or do you like having both of them kind of combined together?
It's funny. There's been a lot of the conversations that we've had amongst coaches, and that's what I was just talking with Reggie about. And so the answer is yes. I think you get what I think the best part about the joint practices, Maria, is you get an opportunity to go against a different team, different schemes, different nuances relative to scheme, personnel, techniques, and fundamentals at the line of scrimmage, coverage contours, concepts, all those types of things. And you get it in more controlled settings. That doesn't mean that injuries can't occur. But that's, to me, been the benefit. And that's always been something that we've valued extremely since 2017. We've become an outfit that, because of those things, we felt like we've gotten a lot of good work. That does not mean that there's not important parts of when you get tackled and things like that, but it's always weighing the risk reward of the 10 snaps you would get for the starters. Or if you say, let's just say you approached each of the 3 preseason games where they're getting 10 to 15 snaps, do those 30 to 45 snaps that they would accrue and accumulate. Does that equal, what do you think is best to go into week 1 healthy and ready to go and being at your, optimum ability? If you told me that, yes, we're going to be able to play guys, but you're leaving yourself a little bit more immune to some of the risks in terms of the injuries and stuff, and then it's a no-brainer. But those are the things that we're always weighing. But I think, long story short, I've always felt like the practices are more valuable than the games. Yes.
Can you maybe see in the future having more joint practices versus games? Or
I think there's a lot of layers to that relative to some of the people at the league office and different things where, these preseason games are valuable to be able to evaluate guys or get other opportunities. But if you're asking me personally, I've always leaned towards trying to get that work where you can maximize 4 opportunities versus somebody else. You can get an opportunity to run things that maybe you wouldn't do otherwise, get looks at different things that other teams are less inclined to activate than what they typically put out there in preseason games. And that's just our approach. That's not for everybody. And I think you've seen there's a handful of teams that are leaning more towards, they are playing guys a little bit more. And those are things that we're still debating on as it relates to how we want to approach Denver based on how the game unfolds or based on really how that week of preparation and those practices unfold.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jordan?
Sean, when you're looking at your young defensive backs, what are certain stepping stones or like teaching blocks that you're expecting to see or wanting to see week over week?
You talking about in practice or in the games?
In the joint practices in the games. And I guess I'd probably be more specific talking about like Trey Tomlinson, Russ Yeast, Quentin Lake, those guys.
Yeah, so I think it's just continued ownership of, what is the call, what are the situations, what is the communication that's required, and then how does that affect the way that I'm playing my fundamentals and techniques, and then being able to cut it loose and play as fast as possible. I think those competitive ops, you mentioned a guy like Trey Tomlinson. I think everybody would agree. You see the competitiveness, physicality at which he plays this game, the ability to be able to play one snap to the next and not let a previous play, whether it didn't go the way we wanted to, affect the way that he approaches the next snap. I think Russ Yeast, just being able to get in there, hear the communication. He and John Johnson got a handful of snaps. I think that's really beneficial. I think Quentin Lake, as a guy, like I had mentioned yesterday in the press conference, he's a guy that hasn't gotten a whole lot of opportunities last year. He did get some time late in the season, but the more he plays, the more comfortable he's gotten. I like the physicality that I've seen from him, particularly in some of those coverage units each of the last couple weeks. played a few snaps of dime for us last night, and then he played a handful of snaps at safety. And so I think just those opportunities are so beneficial, but there's so many layers to how we want to communicate, how we want to see things as one, how we want to be able to play off of one another, very similar to a quarterback receiver or a guard tackle establishing a rapport together. That's really important for those safeties and those corners. And, just continuing to really just figure out what does it look like? What are the different personnel groupings and who are going to be the best 11 for us based on those different things on September 10th. And everything is geared towards, figuring that out in a smart way for our team as we collectively build towards, the opener and progressing throughout the season.
And then, do you expect Joe Noteboom to practice next week?
I'm hopeful. It's day to day. I have much better clarity on Cooper and on Derion Kendrick that they're going to go. With Joe, it's kind of a fingers crossed. And then, if not, then next week is where we anticipate the thumbs up. But I would love for him to be able to go if possible.
And then, Sean, you had said previously, obviously, you're still working out, gathering details on what the situation was with Joe. Do you have any more details on that? Is it related to the Achilles or?
No, it's not related to that.
Gary.
Hey, Sean. You hear me? Okay.
I can. Yep. Good job, Gary.
There you go. Hey, I'm curious. You're kind of living out there towards where that earthquake was centered, not too far away. Did you feel that a while ago?
What's funny is I get so enamored when I get involved in a conversation and I'm talking that I did not feel it, but my wife came running in and said, "Did you feel it?" The dog knew something was going on. Like, what the hell? And I got a bunch of texts from people that live in close proximity. So it just shows you what an idiot I am. I did not notice it, but everybody else around me did. So it shows you I'm in outer space. And hopefully everybody's all right.
Given with what's happening with the rain, are you guys going to practice on Monday?
You're damn right we are, Gary.
Uh-huh.
We're going. I'm hopeful that based on the weather forecast, which haven't been the most reliable, but hopefully we'll be able to get our work in the afternoon. It should slow down by then. And our Chris Halls and our maintenance crew has done a good job of kind of prepping and doing some things with the field to hopefully prepare us. And shoot, we might open in the rain. It rains pretty frequently in Seattle. I don't know what the forecast is for the 10th, but this might be a good opportunity for us to get some wet ball drills going.
Mm-hmm. And finally, how many receivers would you want to carry when you're down to 53?
It's a good question. I don't know that I have an ideal. A lot of times, Gary, my mindset goes to what does the 48 look like on game day? And there's different ways you can get to that. I would say that probably would be anywhere between 5 and 6 if I was going to guess who I anticipate being active on game day. Mm-hmm. Now, what the active roster looks like, there could be a little bit more flexibility, and there's a lot of things that affect that relative to other position groups. Who are the guys that are right on the cusp of in that 53? But in a lot of instances, my mindset and mentality goes to what does the 48 look like, not exclusive to just the 53. And that's typically been in the 5 to 6 range for us.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Adam.
Hey, Sean. Yeah, just to kind of piggyback off of that, like through 2 preseason games, do you feel like there are any position groups that seem like are going to give you the hardest decisions to make before week 1?
I think there's a lot. I think you're looking at a lot of competition, still up front with our offensive line at that receiver position. You're seeing some really good stuff go on our defensive front across the interior and exterior parts of that line. We've got some depth at safety where guys are trying to figure that out. We've got corners that we're getting one of our guys that we project as a big time factor for us coming back. So there's not anything that I can say is kind of set in stone. You start to have an idea as some of these things start to materialize, but there's still a lot of competition and a lot of evaluation, for us to be able to get to, those final cut downs here in a couple of weeks or, a week and a half or so.
And Raheem mentioned during the week that when it came to cleaning up the run game, he wanted to see better contain and guys getting off their blocks up front. Like, what did you see in those areas when you looked at last night's film?
Well, I think it's similar to what Jordan was asking after the game. You know, the first drive, they did an excellent job going right down the field. You know, it can be as simple as, hey, you know, we're getting double teamed and they're running a downhill direct action. And if we're the 4-eye and we're getting isolated by a tackle, we have to be able to win and try to be able to get off that so that the first contact isn't 4 or 5 yards down the field. Then there was some times like last week where, you know, a crack replace corner or we lose contain on the edge. So run defense is about all 11. And that's why, like, you're figuring out, okay, do these practices give you an opportunity to best evaluate what that looks like with the 11 that we're counting on, or what we think it might look like when we really start playing real games? Do we need to get an opportunity, and will the risk reward be beneficial to us based on how the week goes, where maybe we play more guys than what we've played, a couple series to get a feel for that? Those are all things that we work through, and ultimately our job is to do what we think is best to get ready for the regular season. But each of those things, it'd be by a play-by-play. I thought some of those things Raheem talked about were better, but just the overall consistent physicality and across the board inside based on the schemes that they were running, we certainly could be better. But some of the runs were in a 4-down front, some were in our 3-down stuff, and they did an excellent job of being able to execute. And you do have to be able to say that the enemy has a say, and you give those guys credit for executing as well.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Dennis.
Coach,
What's up?
what's the biggest area that your defense hasn't improved from the first game until last night?
Well, a lot of the stuff that I think has been improved are things that you guys don't necessarily see in those preseason games. I thought the overall sense of urgency, sense of ownership and understanding, consistent execution of the techniques and fundamentals on all three levels of the defense, thought that was on display at a pretty high level the first practice, and it was pretty damn good the second practice too, for the most part. There's always plays here and there, and it's not like you're keeping score in those practice settings, but you do have an idea of, all right, what would be projected on in some of these red area situations, in some of the move the ball settings, a 2-minute, is this conducive for success or not? But, you know, when you're not tackling, there is an element of, okay, you know, you can't account for everything, but I would say that was what I saw. And then last night, you know, you're getting a lot of different guys that are playing throughout the course of it. But I think there were some guys, I thought Bobby Brown played better than he did the first week. I thought he did a nice job with some plays on those early rundowns. I thought Jonah Williams showed up on the interior parts of the line. I thought Michael Hoyt played with more physicality on the edge. I thought, you know, Zach Van Volkenberg showed up. I thought both of our inside backers with Roseboom and Jake Hummel had really nice nights. And then I was pleased with what I saw from John Johnson and Rush East getting some snaps at safety. I think Trey Tomlin continues to show why he's such a tough competitor. And so, you know, those were some things that I was pleased with last night. But then I could go on for a while about the specifics relative to, you know, our Monday practice and then our Wednesdays and Thursdays practice when we actually went against the Raiders, where there was a bunch of different stuff over the course of, you know, 100+ snaps that we were able to accumulate.
Thank you, Coach.
You're welcome.
Jordan.
Hey, Sean, thanks for taking a follow-up. You're close with Zach Taylor. You're close with Matt LaFleur. I know the respect you have for Bill Belichick and Sean McDermott. The situations they've gone through over the last year where something has happened, a traumatic event has happened to a player, and they've talked and decided to suspend the game. As a coaching fraternity and community, do you guys ever talk about, you obviously never want a worst case scenario. Do you ever talk about like how you would handle it? And is there conversations amongst the staff as a whole about how you guys would handle it? Or is that protocol still something that's developing in conjunction with the league?
It's a good question. The answer is yes. We talk about those types of things all the time. I don't know that you can ever even simulate some of those ones in particular, whether it's DeMar or what happened with Bolden last night. But I think the easiest way that I can answer it is, I think it's kind of understood. And I think that's been reflected in those examples that you used, that person is always greater than player. You know, and that's what you want to really have with your decision making. I mean, what a blessing it is to play this game. And there are certain things that come with it that are so unfortunate. And that's the worst part of this game. And that's where you always want to say, all right, the human being, the person over this player in this game right now always takes precedence. And I think that's just kind of understood. I can't imagine that there would be anybody that feels any different than that. And I think the best thing is just follow your intuition and the character that I think has collectively been represented by those people in those situations. But to say that it's almost similar to when we've talked about it before. You can read about certain things, or you can kind of role play, but then when you get into it, man, is it a different type of thing. But what's been consistently displayed in all of those, and it would be no different if we were to be in something like that. Hey, this is bigger than football, and let's make sure that that's the priority. And I've been proud to see that reflected from those people that you mentioned.